Welcome everyone, it's the Crypto Lark. I'm very excited to get a chance to chat today with Molly Jane from Cointelegraph. She's on the forefront of the editorial and the news beat of crypto. Molly, what's going on?
Hey, nice to see you. Nice to chat.
Now, I wanted to start off, we're going to just jump right into some fun news stories and let's start talking about Bitcoin because there's been so much interesting happening with Bitcoin recently. So we've seen, for example, the Bitcoin futures markets. There
Yes.
was a day, just a couple days ago, when the CME's futures markets were $323 million, which blew past the biggest spot price exchange, which is Binance, about $230 million. So what are your thoughts on this happening?
Well, I think that with more institutional people getting into the Bitcoin futures, especially the physical Bitcoin futures, such as Backed and then Ledger X, is some people are saying they're trying to beat Backed to the physical Bitcoin futures. I think that it's drawing more people's attention, and I think that whenever something in such, I would say, a thin market like cryptocurrency, whenever these big names get in, whenever these things happen, people are drawn to this, and it can create waves.
Yeah, absolutely. And the CME is interesting because obviously they're cash settled, right? I think we're going to
Yeah.
have a totally different game when Ledger X and Backed come out because, like you said, they're physically settled at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Bitcoin's exchanged, not just a big pile of cash. And that's game changing because if the Nasdaq or the New York Stock Exchange, I guess the New York Stock Exchange for Backed, if they want to have a whole bunch of Bitcoin futures contracts, they're going to require a lot of Bitcoin to make that happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
which the market effects of that I think will be very, very interesting. Overall, though, the whole idea of Backed, it's this monster that they're building. And the futures markets are just kind of the tip of the iceberg. What are your kind of overall thoughts on the impact that Backed is going to have? I mean, Ledger X, that'll be cool when they come out too, but I think Backed is a totally different beast.
Backed is a different beast because I think at the time, I mean, this is from a media outlet, is when we started reporting on it, every headline was you can pay for your Starbucks Frappuccino with Bitcoin, which isn't true. That's not true. In fact, but in a hypothetical situation, some spokesperson has said, you actually really could, in the sense of paying with a sort of backed user interface, and then it would be instantly changed to fiat when you actually made your purchase. So it's, in a sense, you could say you're buying a Frappuccino with Bitcoin. I don't know. For me, the fact that Starbucks had signed on to this thing that was even closely associated with the idea of literally giving a Bitcoin for a Frappuccino was huge. I mean, here it was just the biggest breaking news story of the year. Um, so in that sense, it's like it's big. I don't know how else to say it. It's
It's
big. It's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we don't know exactly what they're going to release in the end. It's still everything's a bit behind the shadows, right? Because obviously they're working through all these regulatory approvals with the SEC and the CFTC and all
Yeah,
these
and the government
regulatory
shutdown did
bodies.
not help with that. The government
No,
shutdown did them no favors.
no, that's right. We probably already have the backed futures contracts if it wasn't for the CFTC being shut down for, was it
Mhm.
6 weeks or whatever? The government was shut down for a
It was
month.
like the longest time in U.S. history.
Yeah, yeah, and that's so. I mean, these kind of political games they hurt Bitcoin, guys. They hurt Bitcoin. Is what ends up happening. Now, the Lightning Network is also something very interesting. We've had a lot of big announcements in the last week or so about the Lightning Network. Obviously, it's continuing to grow all the time, but I did see
Yeah.
that there's some plugins, for example, that lets you, do Lightning on your browser, and that's great. And of course, we also have
On
some
Amazon now,
Lightning
that was also the
exchanges.
thing.
What's that?
You can use Bitcoin to pay for things on Amazon. Another media headline everywhere. Again, it's not necessarily true. It's an extension. Also, it's not just Amazon. It's any e-commerce shop. But to get the clicks, everyone said Amazon, Amazon, Amazon.
The
Yeah.
day Amazon accepts Bitcoin, which will probably happen at some point, but the media will
And,
have said that it's
it's not.
happening 100 times before that.
Yeah. And a first. This is a first. It's not a first. There's so many ways you can use crypto to buy an Amazon gift card, and then okay, I use Bitcoin to buy my Amazon,
Hmm.
Prime order. But did I?
This
Sorry.
is the first conversation ever on the internet. I said it there, for it must be true. Now, we also had some lightning enabled exchanges that are kind of coming into play. Have you had to look into those yet?
Well, when I talk about the Lightning Network, I want to say I'm talking about the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Because I know there's, other solutions. I know for the Bitcoin Lightning Network, at least this week, and this isn't for exchanges, but they have, I don't want to get this wrong. They released their mainnet. They've updated their mainnet in some way so that users can now store money on it. But one thing I found interesting is they made it very clear. This is for developers and users with a sense of adventure, and you should not put any money on here that you'd be willing to lose.
And that's where the Lightning Network is, I guess, overall. That's probably the best way to describe the Lightning Network still right now. It's functional, it works, but it is still, in a large way, an experimental piece of technology. I mean, I know everything in crypto is kind of an experiment, but I think the Lightning Network, more than a lot of other things, it works, it's functional. I've got a Lightning-enabled wallet. I send people payments, and I'm using tipping.me, or I think is it? Yeah, which is a great little site.
That's the Twitter one, right, where you can do.
That's right, you can tip people on Twitter and stuff like that, and that's great. That's a great service, but we're still really early days with Lightning. I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind, which is why the network doesn't have all Bitcoin on it yet, right? It's still developing slowly.
My little anecdote about the Lightning Network is one of my favorite interviews here at Cointelegraph was I interviewed the Bitcoin pizza guy, the guy that spent 22 Bitcoin on
no way, that's great.
On a pizza. And this was last year on Bitcoin Pizza Day, because this guy, who I'm not going to say his name because I'm going to mispronounce it, it's Hungarian, Laszlo, yeah, it's a problem. He did the same thing with the Bitcoin Lightning Network last year as a celebration. So he actually was able to buy pizza with Bitcoin on the Bitcoin Lightning Network, but it was this very long, drawn-out process that actually required giving a portion of his private keys, just like showing something that in an actual transaction, he said in the future, you should not do this. Don't use me as an example. But I talked to him about it on the phone for a while, and he said, it's happening. It's slowly happening, whatever, X number of years ago, I used Bitcoin to buy pizza. This time I use the Bitcoin Lightning Network. And maybe soon we all can be like him.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of people using, Lightning Network to buy pizza, and there's been some hits and misses with it, but I want to ask you this question. So this is the guy who, famously spent all those thousands of Bitcoin to buy a couple pizzas, right? And he's famous. And a lot of people think that he's famous for the wrong reasons. I personally think he's famous for the right reasons. He proved a point. But everyone looks and goes, oh God, that cost, I don't know, was it $200 million or something at the height?
There's a Twitter feed account that just every day posts the price of how much the pizzas cost.
There you go. And I'm sure right now it's probably worth $50 million or something. So, I mean, that's it. 2 pizzas are $50 million. When you talk to him, did he seem to regret having done this?
No regret. All he said was he was driving adoption. He said, I got the word out there. I don't look back for a second. And, it was very #no regrets. But he was very sincere.
You gotta keep it real. If he had 10,000 Bitcoin to spend on pizza back then, he probably had another 100,000 sitting in his hard drive.
That's another thing where I'm thinking about it. It wasn't like this was his entire thing. But his story reminds me of my dad, actually, because my dad is always invested in the latest tech, and that meant that when the first walkie-talkies came out in America, he bought them for $500. And without people like my dad, without people like the Bitcoin pizza guy that are going to spend the absurd amounts of money, I mean, you can get walkie-talkies for free now. I mean, do they even make walkie-talkies anymore? It's like these people, they have to be the ones that, now we can say like, oh, he's stupid, oh, that was too much money. But at the time, it was perfectly reasonable. There was not a doubt in his mind that it was worth it to spend that however many Bitcoin for those 2 pizzas.
It's honestly one of those events that's right up there with that. I don't remember the dude's name, but the first dude who flew across the Atlantic or something like that. Like that's that significant of an event. It doesn't seem significant because it was just a dude buying some pizza. But like, if he believed in the adoption, he at some point would have realized, well, that's probably worth more money than it is now at some point in the future. And
I doubt he would have guessed 20,000, but he could have.
$200 million. I mean, every once in a while, he's just got to look back and go, that's some good pizza, man. Now, I wanted to move on the conversation to talk a little bit about Binance, because there's been so much happening with Binance recently. It's just become this absolute powerhouse of a cryptocurrency exchange. I was one of the first people to kind of review Binance back in the day, like right when they started, and I never expected it would become such a monster powerhouse. I thought, wow, this is gonna be a really great exchange. I really like the token economics and all this stuff, but here we are, all these years later. We have the Binance Charity and Binance Labs and the Binance Launchpad and all these different fiat on ramps happening. I mean, Singapore has just been announced that they're going to have the Singapore fiat on ramp. Argentina's been teased. It's probably going to happen this year. 8 are suspected or promised to be delivered by the end of the year. 8 new fiat on ramps. I mean, so that we've already got, I think, 1 or 2 that have happened. 3 that have happened this year actually was this year Binance Jersey. So a lot's happening. So what are your thoughts on Binance as this kind of titan of the industry?
Well, again, my perspective is, since I'm an American, I use Coinbase. I have like the nice app. It's easy, it's simple. I don't think about it. But for the rest of the world, Binance is just incredibly important. Just the most important. And we mentioned this earlier, I think in this interview, where, or I guess, we mentioned this, before you've said something about how you hope Satoshi Nakamoto never comes out because they, him, she, they would be attached to something so big and there would be all of this responsibility. And one thing about Binance is there's CZ and he's just a mild leader. And so far he hasn't done anything yet that have made people, turn on the exchange in a way that a lot of people have. There's Justin Sun out there with Tron, huge Twitter presence. And CZ is kind of just there. He's living. He has like the Binance tattoo. And so as this exchange is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and this person is becoming, like almost a mythical type figure in terms of how much power he really has. He runs, I mean, crypto is decentralized, but with an exchange like this, you're on centralization ground, I think. I think it's really important that he is remaining this relatively neutral character.
Yeah, and obviously it's a lot of power to wield, and we have seen people overanalyze some of his decisions. I mean, they delisted Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, for example, and there's been different beefs that he has had with different projects for whatever reason, and he's decided not to list their coins as a result of those, whatever happened between those people. And it's okay, because you know what? It's a private business. It's not a public utility that, coins have some kind of right to be listed on Binance. It's very much not the case at all. But it is really interesting to see really how it's developing and the kind of continued reach. I mean, it just keeps growing. This is the thing with Binance. It's not taking these big hits and like, oh, well, Binance has also it just becomes more and more relevant all the time. And I feel like the launching of the Binance chain has launched into a whole new level of relevance. Now, there are some people out there who are saying Ethereum is going to die because of the Binance chain and it's all going to be over, but not quite the case. What are your thoughts on it?
No. So the Binance chain, and especially Binance Coin, which has seen unprecedented growth in this bear market. Binance Coin is just, it's like you're looking back at 2017 when you look at Binance Coin's growth. I think it's a good thing because I personally am not like a one chain, one coin kind of person working in the space. And you can have Ethereum, you can have Tron, you can have Bitcoin, and you can have Binance chain because they do very different things and they represent very different things for very different people. And we're already way past the point where everything will disappear and there will just be one. I do think things will fade out, but Binance mainnet is serving a specific purpose. And it also, as of yet, it doesn't really do smart contracts. So how can it kill Ethereum if that's one of Ethereum's biggest things? It's people kind of just shouting at each other. And I think that we should support each other and support Binance Chain, support Tron, and support everything, Yeah,
because everyone's bringing innovation to the table. Everyone's bringing users to the table. And we're so small. The infighting drives me crazy because it's such a small community. We're such a small technical niche of what's being built here, and this kind of team sports mentality, like we're bringing the worst of the old world into the new systems, and we just don't need it. And I think actually CZ said it very well the other day, and it's a massive paraphrasing, but basically he just said, something like we stand on the shoulders of Ethereum. We're not trying to compete with Ethereum. We do something very different. We don't have smart contracts, right? And so in typical kind of CZ humbleness, I think that kind of came across, but every new smart contract platform at some point or another has been called the Ethereum killer. And it's just one of those things that, it makes a good title when you make a YouTube video or whatever it might be. And reality is, it's its own beast. It's something different. Valuable, but different.
Yeah, no, I can't stress how small this community is. I go to every conference, I read every story, everyone, everyone. Yeah.
See the same people at the same conferences, like, oh, hey, I saw you in Hong Kong 3 months ago. Oh, yeah, what's going on?
It's like going to a small liberal arts college, except it's your life and your work.
Oh, that's great. Hey, I want to get your thoughts on one final story before we finish up here. And that is that Coinbase has closed their political action committee, which I thought it was really interesting when they launched that political action committee. I was like, all right, finally, the crypto industry is getting on board with how politics work in Washington. You got to bribe the politicians, guys. That's how it works. And then they closed it. So what do you think about this?
Well, so again, like as the managing editor here, we covered the story when it broke. And I was expecting like, okay, now we're going to be covering these stories every once in a while. The Coinbase pack did this, the Coinbase pack did that. No, silence, completely forgotten about. And then this week we covered, okay, now it's closed. And, we're trying to publish a feature as a follow-up on it. But again, that's going to be our follow-up is it opened, there was silence, it closed. I don't know what's going on there. More silence. I don't know what's going on there. The US government is, I'm not going to say it's in shambles. We can leave politics out of this, but it doesn't work amazingly. And PACs are their own sort of secretive problem, and in some cases, solution. And I'm very curious what that PAC has been doing this year. And I wonder if they did do anything, and if they did, if the effects will be ever public, or if it's just, they worked in secret for a year driving adoption and it's just
greased a bunch of hands and then just walked away.
It just disappeared. I don't know. I also would say I don't think that this is the last PAC that will be crypto related or the last lobby group or anything like that. It's
there'll be plenty more.
The first but not the last.
Yeah, the crypto industry, look at the money that's being made right now in crypto.
If you think about it, it's like people always try to compare crypto and cannabis. I think that they have very little in common except for the political lobbying. The cannabis industry is huge. The pharma industry with their lobbyists. Why can't the crypto industry also have their lobbyists? Because eventually, the SEC, the CFTC are going to come out with some public statements. They cannot keep silence forever.
That's right.
At some point, there will be a bill, a law, a regulation that is at a national level instead of all these little state level things, like crypto donations for the political elections. We're having the elections in 2020. Will there be any sort of more guidance on that? There is some, but it's old. It's very old. And it was made with just Bitcoin. And now there's, 2,000 coins on CoinMarketCap alone.
It's not equally applied across states. Some states allow things, some states don't. So very interesting to see what will transpire with that, and of course moving into the future. Molly, thank you so much for coming on and talking crypto with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.